to the She Leads podcast. I'm your host, Adrienne Garland, CEO and founder of She Leads Media, a global media company dedicated to the advancement of women leaders and entrepreneurs worldwide. I'm also an adjunct professor at NYU and Rice University, where I teach on the topic of entrepreneurship. I'm a mom to two wonderful young men and married to my best friend from college. Join me each week as I dive into raw conversations with remarkable, uncompromising, and inspirational women entrepreneurs and leaders. My hope is that these conversations and their advice will encourage you to put yourself out there and gain the visibility that you and all women deserve. We're all about stripping away the sugar-coated conversations and moving boldly in the direction of our magnificent dreams. For far too long, women have been conditioned to soften their words, modify their actions, and show up in the world to conform to outdated at best and harmful at worst cultural norms and ideals. Why? To keep those who are outside of the power structures from gaining power, prestige, wealth, and influence. This has prevented women from being recognized and respected as the powerful leaders that we truly are. The She Leads podcast is here to shine the light on all the incredible women, to encourage us to show up, speak up, and showcase the amazing work we do. Speak with confidence about the innovative and transformational thoughts that we have, and celebrate the positive impact that we are making in this world, both personally and professionally. So let's do this. Let's lead. Hello, and welcome back to the She Leads podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by the She Leads Live 2024 conference. It's our 10th anniversary conference for women entrepreneurs and leaders, and it's taking place in New York City at Civic Hall on October 18th and 19th. So, one of the things that we are talking about at the conference is how to get visibility to grow your business. And that's why today I cannot wait to welcome my next guest. Her name is Michelle Glogovac, and she's a former corporate aviation executive. But now she's the CEO and founder of the MLG Collective, a podcast PR agency and award-winning author of How to Get on Podcasts. Oh my gosh. Known as the podcast matchmaker, Michelle specializes in working with entrepreneurs, authors, and experts to be podcast guests and expand their stories. Can you understand why I'm so excited to speak to Michelle today? Welcome to the She Leads podcast, Michelle.
Thank you, Adrienne. I'm so excited to be here and to get to talk to you.
Oh my goodness. I am so excited to talk to you. First of all, you are doing and have done all of the things that we are constantly talking to the She Leads audience about. Launching a podcast, guesting on other people's podcasts, writing books, right? And getting media coverage. I just saw your article in the Costco magazine where your book is now carried, which is amazing. But all of these things that you are doing, you're really walking the walk of what you teach other people to do. So we're going to dive into all of it because we need to hear it all. But I'd love to sort of understand your story a little bit too, because so many people can relate to starting out in one thing and then switching to another. So you were a corporate aviation executive. How did you sort of move into being an entrepreneur?
You know, the first part was a total fluke. I went to school because I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. I have my bachelor's, my master's degrees in law, and I needed a part-time job in college, and I could walk to the airport. I went to UC Santa Barbara. So I walked and I became a customer service rep at the General Aviation Terminal and quickly became the bookkeeper and the head of HR. And when I graduated, they gave me a salary and benefits. And I was like, yeah, this is great. I don't have to job search. I am staying right here. And I was living in Santa Barbara. So you can't really beat that. And I stuck with it and just climbed the ladder, worked for a few different companies. I sold jet fuel to corporate flight departments. So I got to meet wealthy people, celebrities. It was a pretty cool gig. And 18 years later, finally, I was laid off. And it was the blessing in disguise because I would probably still be here if I didn't get that push of what else is there? By then, I had two tiny humans. They were a year and 3 weeks apart, and they were at home with me and my husband. He works from home too. And I said, what is it that I can do where I can make a financial contribution to our household, stay at home with my kids because I'm enjoying working from home, but really feel like I'm making a difference in the world that they're growing up in? Because I felt like selling jet fuel and keeping the rich was really not benefiting them besides the salary and benefits. And that's when I discovered podcasting. A woman from my birthing class from my first child had sent me a message, and she said, there's a life and business coach who's launching a podcast. I think you might get something out of it because I know you're on this journey of what's next. And I didn't even know that the purple button on my iPhone allowed me to listen to podcasts. This is in 2018.
Oh, wow.
And I started listening, and I started using social media of, I don't know what I'm going to do, but there's this podcast and she says that we all have a purpose and a passion, and I'm going to figure it out. And she reached out to me and said, you obviously like and understand what I'm doing. Do you want to pitch me to be on other shows to get interviews? And I was like, that's a thing? Yeah, I'll do that. Totally. And I'm someone who has to know everything about everything. So I learned everything that goes into producing a podcast. I ended up producing hers, producing others, but I fell in love with the pitching part because we get to share our stories and our knowledge on a platform that's accessible by everybody. And to me, that was a way to change the world. And I like to say that I'm changing the world one voice at a time by sharing these stories, by helping people figure out what is their story, what's their journey, how do we share it with others so that someone listening, we build that empathy, we let them know that they're not alone, and we give them the tools and the knowledge that they can get to whatever the next step is in their journey. Somebody else has done it as well. And to make it really just a better place to live in, that we're not alone, even when it feels like we're alone.
I love this so much. You're just wrapping all of the amazing things that I think about all the time into your work. And I agree with you that everybody has a story to tell. And usually, especially we're so focused here on women entrepreneurs, you'll find that women entrepreneurs especially have a story to tell because often the companies that they are starting are born out of some problem or challenge that they've faced in their life. So it's like their story is inherent in their business. And that's a great thing, I think, to use as fuel to start the business, but sometimes that can get in your way of growth because it's so personal. These businesses become so personal. But I love that there is this, and it's been around for a while, but there's this new medium, right? A new media channel, podcasting. And I think there's two camps of people that understand exactly what you're saying, that podcasting has tremendous power, right? And we'll talk about this Podfluencer term that we were discussing a little bit before we got on. And then there's people who you'll hear say, oh, everybody's got a podcast. It's just these people, talking into a microphone in their basement. Like, what possible influence can that have? I'm so focused in She Leads Media about encouraging women to share their stories and share their businesses, and especially leveraging the media to do so. But sometimes they don't. They want the Wall Street Journal article. Can you tell us a little bit more about this whole idea of podfluencers and why it's important as a woman business owner to actually share your story and your business on a variety of different podcasts?
Yeah, I love the term Podfluencer. Spotify came out with it, and I was like, I will take that. I'm going to hook it. And I went ahead and got the domain, the Pod Influencer, and I got the Instagram handle. I took all of that while it was available.
Amazing.
So if you do that, own domains and all that stuff. That's one of my tips. A podcast, yes, it's a blessing and a curse that anyone can have one and anyone can have one. Should everybody have one? Not necessarily. But it allows us to get to know other people. It is like jumping on and listening to your best friend or your neighbor or someone that you otherwise would not meet because, for instance, you're on the other side of the country than I am. We wouldn't otherwise connect per se, to be able to jump on a podcast and have this hour committed to each other to have a conversation is huge. And I think also that I know from my perspective as a host, I share things that I love. I share things that I'm interested in. And people who have the same interests and values and everything else will listen to my show. And when I say, I loved reading this book or I loved this product, this is how I've used it. This is what I got out of it. People buy it. And I know it because the moment I post about a book that I just read that oh my goodness, I loved it and this and that and the other, and I'm going to interview the author because they're amazing too. People go, I bought the book. I actually had someone reach out and say,
Wow.
I hope you really did like it because I went ahead and purchased it after I heard you say that you liked it. And they can trust me. And that's the big part of a podcast is that people who are listening trust what the host is going to say. And when the host extends an invitation for you to come on their platform, that trust is now extended to you as the guest. And everybody who's listening is going to understand that you're a trusted source. And so that's why it's so, you get this that you wouldn't otherwise. It's not like a commercial on TV where you know that they paid for this. Podcasts, first of all, do not pay to be on a show. That is a big no. That is not earned media. That is paid. That's advertising. So don't pay for it. And so people know that you've earned this spot. You have earned this hour, whatever time allotment it is, to be on this show to share your knowledge because it's valuable. And so that's why being on a podcast is such a big deal. You're also talking to a targeted audience. Who's reading the Wall Street Journal versus who's tuning in to a podcast. You also have the longevity of an interview. The Wall Street Journal, it's here today, gone tomorrow. What's the next article that comes up? A podcast is living forever on various platforms. And if done right, it's also living on websites and social media. And we can repurpose them so that they keep coming up. So you get so much more content and lifespan out of a single interview than you would out of a TV show or an article per se, unless it's an online article and people start Googling it and whatnot. There's so much more on a podcast because you're sharing it with your audience. I'm sharing it with mine. And there's that ripple effect as we continue sharing and we're tagging and we're collaborating and we're making it bigger than this 30 minutes, 1 hour of us being together. It's now huge, the ripple effect.
Yeah. And for all of those reasons, it's so important for a woman entrepreneur not to necessarily have her own podcast unless that is something that she feels like she can commit to and leverage for her business. But even just guesting on other people's podcasts. And one of I don't know if it's mistakes because I get it, but I see one of the mistakes that guests on podcasts make. And it's that, they've taken the time to either have their PR agent or themselves pitch themselves to the show. They come on the show, they dedicate the time and have this amazing conversation. And then I notice that they don't always take full advantage of what just happened in the conversation. And the guests almost expect that it's the job of the host to do all of the marketing. And yes, the host definitely needs to be doing all the marketing, although we all know that it's such a heavy lift and it's difficult, right, to do all the things that we really need to be doing and repurposing the content. But guests can amplify everything that you just said by also taking that content, adding even more context to it, explaining things more. And I don't see a lot of guests necessarily doing that. So can you give just maybe a couple of tips to people who are guesting on other people's podcasts about what they can do to just amplify the conversation and continue that content creation?
Absolutely. I compare the whole podcast interview process to a dinner party, where the host is your dinner party host who's inviting you to their home for a meal. They're cooking it, they're cleaning their house, they're setting the table, they're doing all of this effort for you to come enjoy a meal. Do you show up empty-handed? No, you bring flowers, you bring a candle, you do something, you engage in conversation. You don't sit on Instagram scrolling while someone else is talking. And then what happens after the dinner party? Do you follow up with a thank you note? Do you say thank you on the text? Do you share photos? This is a way to thank your host by sharing all of the effort that they've put into this quote unquote dinner party by letting your followers know, I was just interviewed here. And the number one piece of feedback that I get from people as to why they're hesitant in sharing is that they don't want to self-promote. And I'm going to tell you right now, it's not self-promotion. It is allowing your audience to know where you have just shared your story and your knowledge so that they can gain it for themselves. It's not you saying, look at me. Here I am. I was just a guest. I'm so amazing. I got on this podcast. It's, hey, everybody, I just showed up on She Leads and I shared my entrepreneurial journey. And so for those of you who want to hear more about me or, who want to just get a bit more of the insight behind my story, you should go check it out. It's as simple as that.
Yeah.
Also, it's that you might have followers who, like myself, I'm a stalker. I say that I love the term in a good way, not in a creepy way, but they're following you and you don't know it. And they might need that one single interview to hear from you for them to go, you know what? Yes, I do want to work with you. Yes, I want to buy your product. Yes, I want to buy your book. And it's that one little interview that is the tipping point. But if you don't share it, then it's not going to tip them over the edge. So sharing it is as simple as create some templates for yourself for social media. I use Canva. I am a huge Canva fan. It's ridiculous. They don't pay me. I pay them. But I create templates for Instagram, for Pinterest, for Facebook, for anyone, wherever it is, so that it's branded. Oftentimes the host will give you assets that you can use. And I've also heard people say, well, it doesn't fit my aesthetic. That's not an excuse either. You can create templates that, have the podcast name, the episode name and number, their cover art, plug that in there and share it. And it's so simple. If it's just plug and play, it makes it very easy. I also create and these are things that I do for all of my clients as well, so that you can, I say you have to repurpose this, but I give them the tools to make sure that they can. We create Spotify playlists for them. Spotify allows you to upload your own artwork. So I do a cover art. It's just an Instagram kind of sized post. And we create a playlist that says Michelle Glogovac podcast interviews. Listen to interviews by Michelle Glogovac, the podcast matchmaker, host of My Simplified Life. And you have a description. And every time an interview goes live, we add that interview to the playlist. And then you have a unique link that you can put on your LinkedIn, because there's a media portion on LinkedIn. You can embed it into your media kit. You can put it as one of your links on your Instagram. You can use that link everywhere. You can also embed that link onto your website, so you don't have to keep adding to it. You just add it on the Spotify playlist and there it is. You can create blog posts out of it. There's so many different things that you can do that are really simple. And, just incorporate it into your social media content that you're already creating. I also download a transcript of every interview that I'm on, every interview that a client's on, and we pull out at least 3 quotes that those can then be turned into social media graphics. Because even though I might think, I don't say anything that's worthy of a quote, but here I was quoting all along Michelle Obama or Oprah in my Instagram, and yet I was throwing out some really good nuggets every once in a while. So we're picking those quotes out and we're turning those into graphics and then saying, hey, by the way, I said this on this show. So go check out that episode as well. So they're really simple ways that don't take a lot of effort or time that you can use to repurpose and to ultimately thank the host. Because as you said, so many guests aren't doing it. And I've gotten complaints from hosts that they don't do it. And so my advice to hosts, if you're a host out there, is to go stalk the Instagram account, go stalk the social media accounts of people who are pitching themselves to you and see, are they actually sharing it? Because then that sets up your expectation of, oh, they never shared an interview before. Why would they start now? Versus, oh yeah, they're sharing every single place that they've been. Therefore, I know that they're going to share coming on my show as well.
We could sort of end right there. I think that I'm like, whoa, I love this Spotify list for your media kit. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant because you do want to gather all of the media that you've gotten and you want to give that special attention to podcast interviews. If you are out in the media and you might have like a little blurb or maybe, the expert said this sentence, in a podcast, you can go into so much more depth and give so much more context around whatever that either quote might be or what your opinion is. And that is so critically important. And I also love the stalking tip, especially from a host perspective, because it is hard sometimes. You get some guest pitches and they're really flashy and wonderful. And you take a look at the people on Instagram and you're like, wow, they have, so many followers and everything. And you sort of take a quick glance at it to just make sure that someone sort of is who they say they are. But I often don't look and see if they've shared on other people's podcasts. Although I have to tell you, Michelle, I stalked you on LinkedIn and I see that that's exactly what you do. You promote the fact that you were on other people's podcasts. And I love it because the other thing is that you're surfacing other podcast hosts that maybe they're not as popular as, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, which I love her podcast so much, wiser than me. But, there are so many hosts that are maybe a little bit more niche that are still conducting incredible interviews that offer so much value. And we need to be aware of these because these people are putting in a lot of time and effort and probably money to edit their podcast in order to share other people's stories with the world. So the analogy of going to someone's house for a dinner party and then letting everybody know that it was like such a beautiful experience and why is so perfect. So thank you so much for that tip. I'm creating a Spotify playlist as soon as we get off this interview because that is so exciting. I also see that your podcast, you're 241 episodes in. Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. 241, you kind of forget. It's a lot.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah, that is absolutely incredible. I know that is something when people want to start a podcast that intimidates them. How do I keep going? How do I, keep sharing all this different content? What is your, secret for success and longevity?
Processes and templates. Those are the big things so that it becomes a repeatable process. Having a podcast, the number one thing you have to do is be consistent. You have to show up and whether that's every week, every month, every other week, you show up the same time every time so that your listeners know, okay, this is when I can hear from Michelle. She's going to come every Tuesday morning. And it's funny because in July, I had gotten ahead and then I went, it's summertime. I'm going to take a few weeks off. And it was in the third week, I was releasing the following week that I went, nobody has said a thing. Nobody even noticed I was gone. And then poof, there goes the text messages coming off. Are you okay? I haven't heard anything from you in a few weeks. And I went, oh, they are listening. They are expecting. Yeah. And so then I came right back. But that was really, there's only been 2 times that I skipped either an episode or 2 or 3 episodes. And then I came right back. Because it's okay to take a break. It absolutely is. Some people do seasons and that's fine too. Whatever you do, just be consistent in how you do it. And, again, I go back to Canva using the same templates for the graphic. It also creates your brand, acknowledgement that people know, oh, that's the My Simplified Life podcast because I recognize the colors and I recognize the font and it's always the same. It's not boring. It's brand recognition. So, making it as simple as you can on yourself. And, having the same recording platform and having a whole instructions for your guests. Do they click on the calendar link and does that just automatically tell them this is where we're showing up and this is what it's going to be? Just making it as simple as possible.
Yeah, the consistency piece is definitely the key to success. And I think that that's in like everything in life, but it's not easy. Like as simple as it is, it's definitely not easy to be consistent. Even with the She Leads podcast, I got a notice from my hosting platform the other day that it was 52 weeks straight that I have been podcasting, and I was like, oh, that's amazing that I've done it every single week for the entire year, because I definitely took a little break in there, and I too got ahead at the beginning of the summer, and I said, let me just kind of relax a little bit. And now I'm in the I need to get this out, next week, because I'm not as far ahead as I thought I was. But I think that is something that we as women entrepreneurs also sometimes maybe downplay, is that people are listening, right? And we do need to always be our authentic, genuine selves, because people are listening. They're listening for clues. They're listening to you over 52 weeks to see if you're the type of person that they want to work with, that has the expertise that they're looking for. I know that I hired a coach a couple of years ago, and it was only after like crazy binging her podcast, I felt like I got to know her and her way of thinking and how she approached things. And that made the decision to hire her so easy, because I felt like I knew her and I knew the advice that she would give me. And I was so happy I did. She's incredible. I don't know if you know her, Eleanor Beaton.
I don't, but I will go stalk her.
She's actually changed the name. Go stalk her and binge her podcast. She's actually changed the name of her podcast a couple of times. But she is just absolutely fabulous. And I agree with you too. The ability to form relationships, which I talk to my students about all of the time, especially in entrepreneurship. Yes, you need the business strategy. Yes, you need the business model. Yes, you need to be solving the problem. But sometimes just reaching out to people that are in your network can be the most powerful thing, and it can get you farther faster. So podcasting is this excellent way to build a deeper relationship pretty quickly.
It really is. And I'm very selfish with my show. I always say, if I'm inviting you on, it's because I want to get to know you better. And it's much better to say, do you want to be on my show, than it is, can I pick your brain for a cup of coffee? It's the big no. Nobody's like, no, we don't have time for that. But if I'm going to interview you, then I can ask you the questions I want to get to know, while also giving you a platform that's going to reach thousands of people. So it's an absolute win. And for me, I've interviewed so many people that when my book came out, I was easily able to ask them, can you blurb the book? Because you've been on my show. We now have a friendship. We have a relationship. And it opens up doors, as you said, that wouldn't have otherwise been there. So having a podcast, being a guest on podcasts absolutely creates relationships, because we are essentially sitting down for a cup of coffee, just that we're getting much further along, than if we had just met in line at Starbucks and it was like, hey, I like your shirt. Oh, I like your shirt too. Thanks. And creating that kind of a relationship.
Yeah. That's so great. And the other thing too that I think is really fascinating about podcasts is that, if you have some type of, history in your podcast, if you've been around and consistently podcasting and have recent episodes, I find that when you reach out to someone who you might not otherwise be able to get to know, that people are very willing to come on your podcast and share their story, because people love to talk about themselves. And when you invite them, they say yes. I actually recommend it. We do this thing in my class where I ask the students to go out and interview an entrepreneur so that they can just understand their story and, that it's not all sunshine and rainbows and, all the lessons that are there and everything. And they ask me like, oh my gosh, like that was such a powerful thing to do, but I want to build my network. And I've given them advice like, why don't you just start like an interview show or a podcast? Because it's basically the assignment, just over and over and over again. And so I don't really know if anybody has taken me up on the idea or not, but it truly is a way to expand your network, expand your knowledge base. And in a way, like you said, that's win-win for both parties.
It truly is. I've made wonderful friends who are then like, can I give you my cell phone number? And then I'm like, oh my gosh, we just took it to the next level. Like, that's incredible. We're now texting buddies. But, it's because we've connected and you get to figure out quite quickly if you like another person through an hour-long conversation. And it's just great that you can invite someone in that way that you want to get to know genuinely. And, you talked about sharing your story and the buzzword authentic. I hate the word, but if you show up and you simply are yourself everywhere, then you are being authentic. You don't have to talk about being authentic. The biggest compliment I get is when someone says, I've listened to your show. I've seen you on social media. Now I'm meeting you in person and you're the same person on every platform. Yes, I am. That is me.
Yeah.
I don't show up because we do
Can you imagine?
We see people show up on social media, differently. And, maybe they're decked out in makeup and hair and whatnot. And then you see them in real life and you're like, wow, you're a hot mess. I am who I am, whether I'm on a podcast or you see me at the grocery store, it's going to be the same exact thing. And so if we all just show up in that way, then nobody has to start talking about being authentic because we are just ourselves.
I think it's exhausting to have all of these different personas. Like, yes, okay, maybe I won't wear what I have on right now, speaking on stage, but I think it's exhausting to have different iterations of yourself. The easiest way to move through life is to be who you are everywhere that you are. And then, you don't have to play any games. And I think that that's something that social media has, there's a lot of negative things that have come out of social media, but I think that's one of those negative things as well, because people they only put the highlight reel on social oftentimes. And then when they try to be genuine, it's like a false version of being genuine that's not genuine. So that's just a whole mess. Before we actually wrap up, I wanted to talk about, because we talk about this all the time at the She Leads Live conference, we actually give people the opportunity to get up in front of journalists and podcasters and increasingly television, different magazines, things like that. And we allow the women entrepreneurs to do a pitch to the media. And the media provides them with feedback on how they can best get coverage based on the pitch. And it's a very encouraging, loving panel, but also, pretty straightforward and direct, because journalists do not have the time to play around, right? So I think, I guess I know that type of approach is also increasingly important for people that have popular podcasts. Can you give some tips, because you truly are an expert in this area? Can you give some tips on best practices when it comes to pitching yourself to a podcast?
You need to be personal. You need to go listen to an episode or two first and foremost. And that is how I feel you should open up your pitch. Every pitch that I send is personalized to the host. This is what I've listened to. This is what resonated with me. This is part of my personal story and why I connected with this episode. Or maybe I knew the guest that they were talking to. and I connect with them on a personal level. So that is how you open the pitch. Let them know that you are not copying and pasting. Do not throw spaghetti on the wall and copy and paste the same pitch to 50 podcast hosts, because first of all, we notice it's very easy. And then it's a small network. We talk. There has been times where I've seen a thread of, I just got this pitch. Oh, I got the same one. Oh, I got the same one. Everybody sees it. So personalize your pitch. Show them that you care and that you have done your homework and your research. That's first and foremost. Do not give the host homework. Hyperlink to your website, to social media, to past podcast interviews. Make it so that they don't have to stalk you if they don't want to. They should be able to stay within that email and click a link in order to find out about you. They should not have to go type in your name to Google because you didn't include a single link. So don't give them homework. From the topics that you've created for yourself, and I say come armed with at least 6 that should be on your media kit. They don't have to be related. It can be about your personal journey. It can be about your business journey. It can be about something else that your knowledge, your toolbox, your tips. It can be a whole variety of different things, but take the top 2 or 3 that are most applicable to the podcast that you're pitching and include those as the topics. You'll attach your media kit so they can see everything and have a choice if they want something else, but select the 2 that are the most relevant so that, again, it shows that you've done your homework. You know what would be a good fit for the show, and be polite in it. You know, I appreciate that this is what you're putting out there, and I'm going to show up as well. And here's some other places that I've been. And then you can send a couple follow-ups, but be relevant in your follow-ups. Do not be the pesky person who 24 hours later, this is not hard-hitting news. We all have full-time jobs. So do not reply, following up. Did you see this? Bumping it to the top of your inbox. Don't. You don't have to be catchy. Do not save your information or the bigger nuggets for the follow-up. I've gotten that many times of, oh, I didn't mention this in the pitch, but I've also been here and I've done this and I can do this. And don't do that. Just send a simple follow-up of I'm following up, and reply to the initial email that you sent so that they all create a chain in the inbox. So nobody has to go look and go, I don't know what you're talking about. These are the simple things. 2 follow-ups for every pitch that goes out. I spread them out about 2 or 3 weeks apart so that it gives them time to look at it. Oftentimes the follow-up, they'll say, oh yeah, I meant to get back to you and I didn't. I appreciate that you gently, polite persistence is key. Keep it short in your follow-ups, but don't give them homework.
This is so good. And it's such similar, I mean, probably even verbatim advice from journalists in major publications, right? Research, understand what I'm writing about, understand what I'm talking about, right? Don't just send a blanket pitch to everybody. That's like a recipe for disaster, and the community's small. They're going to say that person didn't do their homework. One other, just real quick, do you find that when you're pitching your clients to other podcasters that they prefer, or have you seen that podcast hosts prefer a pitch directly from the guest, or are they perfectly fine receiving pitches from somebody like you, or like oftentimes there's a PR agency that they've hired?
I think the feedback I've gotten is that they're okay receiving it from myself and my team. I think when you are not personalizing it and you don't know who the host is, that then they're like, forget it. I know that for me, when I receive a pitch from a PR agency where it's obviously copy and paste, they don't know what they're doing, then I'm like, I'm really sad for the person that paid for this. And if you are going to pay someone to do this for you, ask these questions. Ask. I recently I created a free download on my website of questions that you should ask. And if you were to ask me these questions for my agency, here are my answers as a guide of, what should you look for? Is it okay to ask for a sample pitch email that has landed a client, a guest spot? I say absolutely, because everyone is different. And I will be upfront with these are all different, but here is an exact pitch replica. It's in my book as well of this is what's worked. Are you creating personalized emails? per host.
Yeah.
I've seen someone put, we do it per client. No, that's copy and paste. It's per
Yeah.
host is the email personalized. So little things like that, you know, how much help are you going to give me in creating my topics? Do you create the media kit? What happens after it goes live? Do you help me at all with any of that stuff? Do you chase it down to see if it has gone live? What kind of assets do you provide me? Ask these questions because oftentimes, you know, maybe something's only $500 a month. You might be getting what you pay for versus paying a
Yeah.
little bit more. Like my agency is not $500 a month, but you're also going to get everything that I've talked about in order to make it as easy as possible for you to show up, record the interview, and then share it.
Such an amazing investment too, because you don't want to, as you know, a client, you do not want to, even if it's $500, if you just have the interview and that's it, you are literally wasting that money. So it's
Absolutely.
so worth it to be able to have this comprehensive strategy behind podcast guesting. And so I'm sure that your clients absolutely love everything that you do for them because they might not think of it on their own. So you have so many resources to provide. How can people get your book, get this download that we're talking about, you know, just get in contact with you in general?
My website is the MLGcollective.com and it has links to the book. You can buy the book everywhere you buy books. There is an audiobook that is narrated by yours truly. So if you love the voice, you can go download the audiobook. It's also available on ebook and hardback. And then you can also, all the free resources are there on the website. And you can listen to My Simplified Life wherever you get your podcasts, because I often share all of these tips. In the book, you will also see bad examples and good examples of pitches. So I like to share those on my social media as well, too. I'm at Michelle Glogovac on Instagram. I'm on Threads, Facebook, LinkedIn, all of the places that you can imagine.
Well, Michelle, I cannot wait to read your book and download everything and share it even with the She Leads community, because this is a critical piece of what you need to do in order to really get yourself and your business out there. And getting media attention for your business is a success factor. So I hope that everybody that's listening today will take these tips, go create a Spotify list of all of the podcasts that you've been on, and get everything in order so that you can truly take advantage of just podcast guesting and even starting your own podcast. So thank you, Michelle, for spending this incredible amount of time with me today. I feel like I could talk to you for so much longer. Just thank you so much for everything that you've shared and everything that you're doing.
Thank you, Adrienne. I really appreciate you having me on and for us to get to know each other.
Awesome. Bye-bye. This and all of our episodes are brought to you by the She Leads Podcast Network, the podcast network for women, by women. Thanks so much for listening to the She Leads podcast. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support us, please share it with others, make a personalized post about what you took away on social media, and please leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts. This helps our guests and our show to continue to gain visibility and traction. To learn more about how She Leads Media helps women to gain visibility, you can follow us on Instagram at She Leads Media, or you can head on over to sheleadsmedia.com. If you'd like to network with me and other amazing women, don't forget to join us each year for the She Leads Live conference. Thanks again, and we'll see you soon. This is the She Leads Podcast Network.